This interview is part of the Living Legends collection of the Oklahoma Historical Society. It is an interview with Mr. George Blair, retired Seminole farmer. The interviewer is Mrs. Raymond Berry. There is no date on the interview. It is being copied for inclusion in the permanent collection of the Oral History Program on March 14, 1990 by Joel Todd.
Missionaries, Ohio. Now that's in Defiance County in 1893.
1893?
And we come out here in February of 1901. And we landed at Ada. And now I don't know we had made the trip then in 3 days and 3 nights. My father thought we spent a pretty good time. It's only 2 hours by jet now, though. You know?
Yeah, right.
And we stayed with my uncle's folks down here. They lived in the old house. Did you ever see their old house there just half a mile west of Fiddler's?
Yeah, yes, I saw that.
Well, we stayed there with them. We didn't have well, I think we shipped our furniture out here.
Now that was Sherman Blair?
Sherman Blair, yes, ma'am. And we stayed there. Oh, I must have been a couple of weeks. They took the smallpox. And we moved out in a little, well, just a little log cabin. I'd say it was, about half as big as this room. I believe it was dirt floor, I'm not sure.
Yeah.
But there's a little old spring down there, just a little ways, along the edge of the road. And I don't know, none of us took the smallpox, but I kind of had what they call the varioid. But that was Uncle Sherman, you know, and Uncle Lincoln, Blair. They were kind of dark and protected. It went pretty hard with them. My father had to go over there and do the chores for them in the place. There'd be cattle and horse or whatever. And let me see, then they built on a box room for this house, and I think we used that as a bedroom here, as I remember. And then in 1902, we lived down, well, just a mile south of Uncle Sherman's place, right just the edge of the bottom.
Yeah, I know where the old house was that you lived in there. It's on Clarence Draper's place now.
Yeah. And that's where my brother Roy was born there in that 1902.
Now your father was Norman.
Norman Blair.
Yeah.
Yes, he was the first mail carrier out of this town, rural mail
Yeah,
carrier.
he was our mail carrier when I was a little girl.
And he also carried it on the star up from about up to the springs to the corner.
Yeah.
And then from the corner up here when they changed over, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And we lived down there, let's see, we lived there in 1902. I remember that was the first chill I ever had there. It was an awful hailstorm that day. I remember.
That was on the edge of the slough, and then before the bottom was drained, it was all slough, and it just was millions of mosquitoes.
Yeah.
And
we call it the Dead Sea, you know, down there.
Yeah.
That must have covered a quarter of a mile.
yes, it did.
And McPartland drained that, didn't he?
Yes.
He drained that out to the river.
And he partially drained it, and then my husband and his brothers finished it up after we bought the land above there, you know.
Yeah.
And we built a drainage ditch through there.
We never had chills the first year we was here, but after the second year, we began to have those chills. And I always thought them old sloughs, water couldn't get out of them. And the old pond up there about a half mile west there, that old house there. And I don't know, let's see, now 1903 then, we moved back up, you know where Mr. Wake's place was, there's a little log house just across the old schoolhouse and went back to Northwell.
Yeah, I lived in we bought
there.
the old school, the big old log school.
Mm-hmm.
My father bought that later after they did away with it as a school. My father bought that log house, log school.
Well, did you folks own that land?
Yeah,
there?
yes, we
I
had.
never did know just how much the school district owned there or not?
No, they finally sold it all, and my father bought
What
the school district, that plot where the buildings was on, and 160 acres around it.
And then we lived there that year, and then in 1904, we moved down in the bottom. Well, we lived, you might say the place we lived, do you know where the two last wells the city drilled down on the west end?
Yes.
Well, we lived, I'd say maybe, I'd say maybe 30, 40 yards, kind of a little bit northeast of there.
Yes.
1904. That was the year they had put in the railroad to here, and they must have been down between the Layer Creek and the river, because they'd fire right by the northwest corner of our house. This single file, then going down to the corner to get the whiskey, I guess.
Yeah, you lived there during the time the corner saloon was there.
Yeah, the flood come that year.
Yeah.
But we had gotten out the night before. You see, those rises come down just 12 hours apart. They come down 2 in the afternoon and then 2 in the morning.
Yeah.
And Uncle Blair was staying with the store. You know, they had the store down there.
Yeah.
And he said that sloshing in the back door woke him up. He got out.
Yeah.
And we got out at 4 o'clock on the afternoon before the night of the morning of the ride, and up to Sherman's place there on the hill. They lived up there then. And it got up about 2.5 feet in our house. That the flood did. And I remember good and well, you see, Harry Reeser and Will Ford rode some horses down there in the bottom and got Miller Thomas's family out.
Yeah.
And I think they took a wagon, I'm not sure. Anyway, they got Mr. Trout's family out, but he wouldn't come.
Mr. Trout wouldn't come.
Yeah. And I can remember just as well when they went down there in the afternoon and come back with him. I didn't go down there with him, but they come back on the hill, and he had looked like his heavy underwear on, you know, and it looked like this one on this side here had been thrown back to him, and they kind of a blanket or quilt something on, and there was that bullet hole around that left shoulder blade where they didn't shot.
Someone had shot him from the hills, Michael. He climbed out on the water got so high that he climbed out on top of his building, his store building, and someone from the hills thought they had a grudge against him, I guess, and they thought they'd shoot him off and he'd just go down with the flood, but they just wounded him in the shoulder, and he lived to survive. He didn't fall off.
1931, shot dead.
Do you remember some old stories about the Pretty Corner Saloon?
Well, now, we wasn't here at the time it was put in operation, but old Sherman Blair was. He said it was a man named he called him, he didn't know his last name, said they just called him Professor. Put in that saloon, and he said he often wondered if he knew what the future would be, whether he would have done that or not.
Yeah.
But they were several. I believe John Coleman owned it when we come here. And then Jim McCarty, a man named Jim McCarty, bought him out. And George Hill was the last owner of the corner saloon before Taylor.
Well, George, what did Cookie Miller, was he just a bartender, or?
Yeah, he was, ma'am, he was somewhere or another, we never did know how, and you didn't ask questions of people down there.
No, you didn't.
You just had your own business. But they fell out, him and Jesse West and Joel, and they had a falling out, some or another. And it is our understanding that he sent and got Cookie Miller and Frank Starr. And you see, Frank Starr killed a man down there at that gate right there where you used to live.
Yeah.
Well, the man, they said, Frank Allen, you remember the Allen?
Yes.
Had shot first, driving first. He sent some boy down there that was soldiers after whiskey. And I don't know, that must have been, about 3 and 4, because my father found him at the foot of the hill there. He was just got back that far, you know.
Yeah.
And he died that night about midnight. I don't know. Now he had a boy named Hardy Allen. He was I was about 11 years old, and or 12 something. He must have been about 13 to 14. But they sent him and myself up to his place to get some cloth and some rags, I guess, to kind of stop that bleeding or something like that. Well, we got there just, you know where the old road used to run a quarter mile south of your place down there, you know, to run along the section line?
Yes.
Well, we got halfway up that hill, Hardy and I had, when 2 men stepped out on each side of the road with rifles. It's Joe Allen and Gus Brunson. And they talked to the party a minute or so, and then they went on. See, they'd seen us, but we hadn't saw them. They wouldn't take no chances.
Yeah.
I wouldn't like to live that kind of life.
Oh, no, that was terrible.
Yeah.
Oh, you know, my father was, after Hooky Miller came as a bartender there, I didn't remember whether he was on the saloon or whether he was just a bartender, but I was just, let's see, I was 4 years old when we first moved there. And this was the year before he died, so this was, I was 5, was 1904. And I was 5 years, it was 1906, because I was 5 years old. And he came a few times and visited my father. You know, my father died of TB, and he was down in bed almost a year. And Hooky Miller came by to visit with him a few times, and I, as a child, you know, was so fascinated because he used that hook on the one arm just like I used my hands. And he brought my father some whiskey from the saloon a time or two, and told my mother to make him a toddy every morning so that he'd keep up his appetite. And he didn't seem like a really a mean person, but I guess he had lived a rather,
I guess he lost that arm in the gun battle.
Yes, someone told me that he did that.
The man that I read in a little, I believe it was the Oklahoma magazine, the man that defended this Indian that shot him and this other man up there at Tree Sands in the 20s.
Yeah.
And killed both of them. He said that Hooky Miller, the way he understood it, was a member of the Red Book gang down here near Frederick.
Oh, yeah.
Of course, nobody never asked, like we said, nobody ever asked those people any questions.
No.
So they didn't like to.
But he was killed at Tree Sands. I have a friend over here in the east part of town that lived there when he was killed, and he said that he was in a restaurant having lunch when this fella came in and shot him.
Yeah.
And shot him off the stool at the food counter where he was eating lunch.
Well, my uncle said, Sherman Blair said that Hooky Miller told him that he gets his own fortune. Said he never had a partner that didn't try to double cross him in some way.
Yeah.
Well, those people, you know, I don't know, they just got started in life that way, I guess, and just couldn't
Wasn't no stopping place.
No. But Frank Starr he was dark complected man. He was as big as Hooky, as tall, and he was he broad shouldered, soft spoken, and I always figured him a dangerous man. Something that way, you know. I was just a boy when all that was taking place, young boy. Well, they never bothered us, and we didn't bother them.
They didn't bother us either, except that just as a child, I was scared to death because all the time nearly, because there was people going and coming down there, and you heard such terrible stories about what went on down there, about people getting killed and buried in the river and in the quicksand and all this, and it kept me scared to death because I was not old enough to really
But
realize.
those people, Miss Walker, as bad as they were, they'd have been accused of the crimes doing today.
Right.
I believe they would, yes, because I don't know, they just, it's like Uncle Elijah Sanders said, whenever a fellow got shot or killed, you can say he done something other against somebody at some time in the past, because they didn't just shoot a man and see him fall.
No, right. They had been provoked to a great extent before they killed people, I think, most of the time.
Well, those people had some little bit of honor too, because one of them said to Uncle one day, he said to Uncle, you know, they had some hands, you know, most hands had horses and saddle equipment. And one of them said to Uncle one day, said to Sherman, said, did you accuse my boss of stealing your saddle equipment? Well, Sherman said, no. Well, he said they did. He said, now they're going to be back there a certain morning. And they was.
Oh.
And I often wondered just how many people would steal stuff and take it back that way.
Yeah, right. Not very many, I'm afraid. Not voluntarily, anyway.
But they always thought that they figured, you know, they had enemies enough without just absolutely making any more.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, now, when you all left down there, where did you move to from there, George?
Well, we moved right there where I live now, right up there.
Is that your old home place up there?
Place, yeah.
Well.
We moved up there in 1906. Yeah. You know, my father said, well, he just, of course, everything was kind of cheap then, you know, in a way. And he said, well, he just know that if he rented, he'd have nothing in time, you know, to buy. I think he borrowed some money and
Bought that little lot up there. Well, he was our I believe he was our first mail carrier on the route down there. And then he used to come, and we had, they built a school building, you know, a mile north of the old log school that we bought. And your father came down every Sunday nearly. Well, I don't know if it was twice a month or whether it was every Sunday, because I was quite young then, but he came 2 or 3 times a month and preached for us there in that school building. That's the only place we had to go for any kind of religious service at all.
One of the members of the Methodist Church, well, this person I'm going to call him, they're dead now, told me that the dude over here in the northeast part of town said that they had made some research. See, Methodist Church was, I guess, the first church here.
Yes.
And they said my father had probably preached the first sermon in this town after it was established. And he and another man held a revival meeting here. Of course, when we lived down there in 1904, he'd go on Sunday. He wouldn't tell us, you know, sometime where he was going to preach. But he has went. I think after we moved up here, he'd go with this. Did you ever remember this blind Methodist preacher, Reverend Wilmore Kendall?
Mm-hmm.
Well, he'd go with him to that ocean places.
Yeah.
And when I was in the Army, out to Camp Dawson, Fort Sill, I went down to the Y there one night and met him. He was there, and he recalled going on the party, you know, service. And I believe that there was a blind woman there. I didn't know whether it was this Helen Keller or not, but I remember there's some blind woman there too, who was there at that meeting. Well, when you get thinking back, you know, those memories, that's about all us older folks got anyway.
We live with our memories.
Yes, that's right.
What year was it that they put the railroad through here and they moved the town from Violet down here?
Well, I think it was 1904. That's the way I understand it. You see, they now, if it had come half a mile about it probably we'd been like more, you know.
Yes.
But some or other they couldn't get what they wanted. That was the talk then.
Yeah.
Up there in that area, they couldn't get what they wanted, and so they just come a mile, well, I'd say it's probably a mile and a half west there where the railroad runs, you know. The old Violet wasn't right on the line. It was,
No.
it was, I think a block or so up there. I've talked to some of the members of the Pioneer Club here about it ought to be a marker of those places, those places.
Yes. There was, what was it, about 3 or 4 store buildings there, George, or do you remember?
Well, I just don't remember.
They had a saloon there, I remember some of them.
Well, Dick Hensley, you know, his folks was old time residents here.
Yes.
And he said one time they had 7 saloons there.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah. And I don't know, I never was up there too much. I believe it was 1902 we went up there. We traded, I believe, at that time with Andy Morrison. He had a store there.
Yeah, Andy Morrison lived there then.
And I think he had some too. I don't know whether he had it then or not, but later on he had it when he was killed.
Yes. His widow told me about people coming around the house at night. I don't know what they had against Andy, but they'd come, someone that didn't like him would come around the house at night and try to, she thought, was trying to get a shot at him, and finally they did kill him at home, didn't they?
Yes, he was. Now, the lady here, I can't call her name. She's a sister of Amy Sanders, or was Ackerman, you know.
Yeah.
Right here,
Yeah.
go back. And she got a book, and it's written by a fellow named Mooney, that he lives in the Midwest City, that gives the history of Pottawatomie County.
Yeah.
And it named those, I believe it said that this history said there was 85 ghost towns. That was places, you know, that had mushroomed up or rode up and later been abandoned.
Just abandoned.
It's interesting to read. She let me read the book. I think she paid somewhere about $8 for it.
Yes, I've heard of that history, and I'm sure it'd be interesting to read. I'd love to read it myself. That's Amy,
Her name?
Eva Pulliam.
Pulliam, yeah, that's it. I never can
Yeah,
think of that.
Eva Pulliam.
Yes, yeah.
I'm sure she'd let me borrow it if I just had time to go on.
Well, she had said something funny in there, and I never had heard my uncle say anything about it. But it said 1897, said there was a woman and a girl and 2 boys come across the river with a team, you know, wagon. And either they come across or they was on this side, I forget which. But anyway, they got the store there, what they wanted, and started back. And the river was way up high, and said she started back across there without, against advice. They told her not to drive in there, they better not, or something like that. Well, she just stubborn, went ahead anyway. And she got about 200 feet out there in the river. Well, it seemed like the river, the water was so swift, it just turned the wagon over or something other, and the boys got out, got back to the bank there where the other man was, but said she was stuck in a sandbar, and this little girl. And she told them to throw her a rope. And the storekeeper wouldn't do it, said that he didn't have anything but new rope.
He didn't want to lose his new rope.
I said she just finally, her and the girl just sank down on that sand and never seen him more. But also said that when that got told around there, what's been done, said that the man bailed out Western Justice, said they went in that man's store and threw everything he had in the river.
Oh.
Left him. And
Stripped him.
they just left him with an empty store, but said he left a few days and wasn't seen anymore.
Would they ever build a ferry or anything down on the river?
Sir?
Did they ever build a ferry or a crossing?
Not that I've
No,
ever
they never
heard
had
of.
a ferry. And there were several crossings, the old young crossing, and let's see, I don't know what that one was called down on our place down there, but the old Young's crossing, was west of town here, and they were famous crossings. People from everywhere that crossed this old Canadian River. It was a very dangerous thing back in those days, Michael, because just in a few minutes' time, a head rise, what they call a rise, would come down and it would just sweep everything before it. And I know when I was a child, I heard just tale after tale of people that would be about halfway across, and this big head rise of water would come down and just cover them up.
Well, there's something else too. It's tricky and treacherous.
Yeah.
Now, you might go across it, and in them days, you might go across it, say, at the corner crossing down here, corner crossing. And you come back, you'd have to angle down the river. See, that was quicksand that washed out underneath there. You'd have to angle back maybe, I don't know.
You couldn't always cross it where you went over.
Yes.
It would be quickie when you came back, you know, and the quicksand was just terrible.
I've got an Oklahoma history that gives some highlights way back there as far as, 1741. It said a French naval lieutenant one time attempted to send that river in boats, but he had a bottom on account of the sandbar.
Yeah.
Now down here where these wells are, it built a bottom over there on the other side.
Yeah.
It used to be just.
And up in the upper bottom where we own the land, it built a bottom on this side on our place. There was about 200, 300, or 400 acres built on this side on our place up there, and it washed away on this side down there on Clarence's and built on the opposite side. And that's the way it did. Of course, since we've had the flood control programs, it's not been as bad because we don't have as much water come down it now.
Well, the local rains never used to bother this river very much. It's always they always snow on the mountains.
Yeah,
up there
right.
in Colorado, New Mexico, it'd come down, and they didn't have the dams and places like that to take care of it.
No, right.
It was sure an unpredictable river, but I've heard grown men say nobody knows that river.
That's right. And it's been a part of my whole life. I moved on it when I was just 4 years old, and I've been around it, all the rest of the time.
Well, the time when it was up now, I heard the Roy Foster say that in the past he could hear this roaring from here.
It would sound like a tornado.
Yeah.
We could hear it after we moved up on the hills, and in the springtime when we'd have a big flood. You could hear the roar from it, just like a big waterfall that was right close to you. It was just terrible.
It had a terrible force too, because I've seen big old trees just go end over end down that river.
Yes, I have.
Down here at the bridge one time, this railroad bridge, when the river was up, and it was in 3 feet. I'd say just get about 2 or 3 feet of the steel work there, the I-beam and stuff. And big old log was going down, and I just think, now if that was up there, that'd injure that, because it just keep a pounding on it.
And it did wash it out a time or two.
Well, they always, it seemed like a rise, always washed out the trestle work on the other side. I think they put on a new bend in 27 and stopped on it. But I always wondered why they just picked out that place, because they've got to run 2 or 3 miles up the river on the other side.
Right.
I just wondered why they didn't go somebody south of town, I guess, engineers know their business. I'll tell you what happened, though. We're talking about a little while. I was up there one day, and there's some surveyors come from the north. And I don't know what they were surveying for. I just was saying that the railroad or whatever said to I. But anyway, there was a cotton gin out there, just kind of across the street and back a little bit. And there's a pond of water there. And that fella with had the lead wire, why, he just jumped right into that pond and went right across it. Right across there. I don't know what the others was done or not, but anyway, it didn't. Well, these border places used to be tough places, I'll tell you.
Yeah, they were indeed. They were just... And a lot of, I imagine, false rumors went around that we heard that there was no speck of truth about what they told, but there were some wild stories told about the early days and around here. And that 1904 flood that came and covered all the corner saloon and the stores down there washed our cattle away. And I remember going with my older sister and my father and older brothers over to the hills on the west of where we lived, and we saw our cattle out in the middle of the river trying to, get to one side or the other, but they was just being swept right down the middle of the river. And some of them were found and some we didn't. Some of them made it to shore, but some we didn't ever find.
One day, my father and I was up there west of that place there in the bottom where we lived, first lived in 1902. And there was an old log cabin that had been built up there. But anyway, some of Joe Allen's cattle got bogged down in the river, and they was working with it.
Out in the middle of the river, trying to, get to one side or the other, but they was just being swept right down the middle of the river. And some of them were found and some we didn't. Some of them made it to shore, but some we didn't ever find.
One day, my father and I was up there west of that place there in the bottom where we lived, first lived in 1902. And there was an old log cabin that had been built up there. But anyway, some of Joe Allen's cattle got bogged down in the river, and they was working with them, so they just finally went and cut some green branches. It was in, I guess, the summertime here, and just kind of let them work themselves out of that there. That quicksand had an awful force, and anytime any wagon or anything stops in there, why, it's just gone.
It's gone.
It just
Sink out of sight.
But it's in, I'll just know from words about that river, too. If it wasn't maybe just a deep canyon to start with, maybe, and places. Now down here at the river bridge, it's 90 feet to solid dirt,
Yeah.
Forced in there or got in there some of it. But down here at the wagon bridge, they claim it's between 20 and 30, where the highway is.
Well, it could have been, and just filled up with silt. What year did your father die, George?
In 1934. Seems like our folks just fought each other 5 years. My brother died in 24, my mother died in 29, my father in 34, and then my brother-in-law, he died in 39.
Well,
There's nothing to say.
So y'all lived over here for, what year did you move in to the house you live in now?
1906, I believe.
Well, we lived,
1906?
you say how long?
Yeah, when did your father buy that house? That's
Well,
where you lived.
we've lived, it's been an organization all the time, but about, 6 months. In 1920, my Aunt Lizzie Blair, that's on Sherman's wife, died. And I don't know whether they moved right over here, across the street, maybe up to about where he lived, kind of at that time. But I don't know how many months, but it's been, something on 3 or 4 months we moved back, instead of being our own home.
But you bought that in 1906?
Yeah. But you see, we didn't get the deed until about 1909.
Oh.
See, statehood come in, you see, on an odd year. They had to have the elections in 1908. Now, I don't know whether that had anything to do with the property or not. I guess it did, though, because...
Yeah, I guess it did, too. Something... it was Indian Territory before then, wasn't it?
Yes, Indian Territory. I remember very well seeing a little cartoon in the paper after statehood. It showed a woman dressed as an Indian. She represented the Indian Territory. And here was a man over here representing the Oklahoma Territory. And there's Uncle Sam read the book. He was saying, "Wow, I wish I could kept that."
Yeah, that would have been cute.
Yeah,
See,
of
for
course. It's a, I don't know if the past is past.
Well, I think the times we're living in now is full of stress and strain, but the times we lived in then were not so stressful, but they were certainly not as fluent as they are now. We had to work hard for what we got even to eat.
now,
Well, we were independent. Now we're governed by rules and regulations
Yeah.
and laws.
Right.
And we'll never have the independence.
Michael wants to ask you something.
did you do farming or something like that, you know, for your money and income?
Now we mean?
No, then.
No, back then.
Oh, my work, well, we did farm when we lived down yonder in the old neighborhood, but we didn't have to move to town.
His father was a preacher.
And preacher, and, well, he was just denomination preacher and mail carrier, and that mail carrying them was by team and buggy, you know, and it took about it took
All day to make the route.
Make the route.
Yeah.
We had a little old team of white ponies, the gray ponies, that about half outlaw, they could make that mail route and run away on that side of yours.
Yeah, I remember that. Why we, as kids, would get out and watch for Uncle Norman to come. We always called him Uncle Norman.
Yeah.
I don't know how come us to get started calling him Uncle Norman, but he was our preacher, and my mother, and I think everybody called him Uncle Norman. And we'd get out every day and watch for those white horses. He drove.
You take the Conwell leader.
No, I don't, George.
Well,
I don't take it.
Here a while back, I talked to, you see, on June the 2nd, I believe it was, 1911, the baseball team here, the boys' baseball team, played a group of a baseball players, traveling group they called the Boston Bloomers.
Yeah,
They're supposed to be all girls.
yeah.
But that's 61 years ago, this last June. And I talked with the two remaining living ones that played in that
On that
year.
team.
And they talked also with the editor up here. And you see, that was Heritage Week, 12th and 16th,
Yeah.
I think it was. So they went over there, editor sent somebody or went over there to the Walter Elder's house, and him and Lee Foley, they had their pictures taken.
Yes, I saw those pictures. Someone showed me a copy and asked me if I remembered the Bloomer girls playing here, and I said I remembered hearing about it because I was just 10 then, and of course then we lived out in the country, and it seemed like 1,000 miles from out in the country to town then, you know. We had to come by wagon, and it took us 2 or 3 hours to get to town.
The funniest thing that happened during that game, now they was all supposed to have been
Women.
women, yeah. But anyway, one of them got on first base, some or another, I don't remember now just how, and Jeff Jones was playing that for our team. Well, so when this fellow played off, they threw the ball over there, and Jeff made a tag at him, and it hit his head and knocked his wig off.
So it was a boy.
Yeah. And he picked up that wig and went just as straight to the railroad tracks. He was in the gateway down there, about 150 yards. he wasn't in that game anymore. That was sure funny.
I wonder if they had a replacement for him.
I think they did, because, you know, the traveling team will always carry 2 or 3 extra players. you
Yeah.
know. But, yes.
I bet Jess got a kick out of that. He was.
Well, everybody else did too.
Yeah. My husband pitched for the Kanawha team here in 1918 and 19 and 20 and 21.
Yeah.
I know he pitched.
Yeah, I know Outlaws used to pitch too.
Yeah, he did. He did before my husband, and then after Ray and I married, all the next year, every Sunday, that was the agenda for us, was go to baseball games, and sometimes they'd have to leave in the morning to get to a place in time to play in the afternoon, you know.
Well, we used to go over to Francis, you know, we had to ford the river down here, or someplace about the bridge. There was that old rock crossing too, you know.
Yeah, right.
I don't know whether I was ever there or not, but anyway, you know, later on they built that low water bridge too.
Yeah.
In there someplace.
Yes, I remember that. And there's part of it still there.
Yeah.
I guess maybe partly covered up, but I remember crossing that.
Yes, we used to go over to Ada play, and they had a pretty good team. They had those Winter boys and some others was pretty fair.
Yeah.
I don't know, if they beat us, we sometimes beat them, but they wouldn't beat us bad all over the pitch, you know.
Yeah.
It seemed to be good at knowing just what the hitters would like and what they wouldn't
What
like.
they wouldn't.
Yeah.
Yes, he was pretty good. He was big and husky and strong and could really throw that ball. He was one of the best pitchers we ever had here for our
Yeah, I
team.
think he was too. Tony Collins pitched this game for when they played the Bloomers.
Yeah.
They beat them 9-5. Well,
Oh, that
we had a crowd, people who go to the games, they didn't have a daytime, you know.
July, right. The whole park would be full of people to watch the games. I remember Jesse Jones and Bud Birch and Walter Elders, and that was some of the players that I remember that played back then. I don't remember when Ace Foley played. Now, he and my older brother were friends.
You mean
And
Lee Foley?
Ace,
Lee Foley.
Lee. Well, it was Ace, it wasn't Ace, Lee.
Now his younger brother, the younger brother that died here a few years back, his name was Guy. He pitched
Yeah.
sometimes.
Well, didn't Lee have a brother named Ace?
Yes.
I think he did.
He's dead though too. But
Yeah, well, he was the one that was a friend of my oldest brother.
Yeah. Well, I don't know. Baseball used to be our Sunday's relaxation if we had it, you know. We didn't want to work all day. And
Wasn't much else to do. As one of my friends here in town said, Sunday baseball and the 5 o'clock passenger train coming through Kanawha was the biggest excitement we had.
Yeah.
On every day at 5 o'clock when the train came through, everybody would go down and see who got off and who was leaving, you know.
Well, in the passenger train days, Ada was closer than any of these other towns.
Yeah,
So
right.
you could go down there at about 10:37 in the morning and come back about between 4 and 5 in the afternoon. Then
Yeah.
the business transact, why, get over with, you know. It wasn't,
I came in on that train many times when I was, you know, in the teens. Come to this.
yeah, they had a little old two-wheeler engine here that would take that 4 or 5 coaches right on down the line. They didn't break any speed record because at that time the track wasn't too solid.
It wasn't that good. No, it wasn't.
I don't know, it's a good thing if we've held on to our railroad, and it's a good thing the Santa Fe's got us, because
Right.
they're
We're getting some benefit from it right now, with the plant out here. Well, Michael, is there anything else you can think of you'd like to know about?
the way they shot them guns around the corner, it's hard to me they hadn't just accidentally killed somebody, because you know they got those, they first had those, we might say those 30 and 38, 30 and 38 Winchesters.
Yeah.
And they got what they call the steel ball guns. And those things, I guess, it's like the army rifle, they shoot
They
them
carry
out.
a long way. They certainly would.
But I don't know, I guess they done most of the shooting around in their area down there. I know there's a big old, must be like a 10 old tree in front of, kind of in front of the Allen Saloon down there, and they just shot us full, it died.
Yeah. A lot of those trees, they left their mark on, you know, the years and years later when we bought the place and farmed it. The trees, you could, my children found, you know, bullets all around in the sand and in the trees, and pieces of the old whiskey jugs, you know, the brown jug with the brown handle, and there'd be maybe a half of one that you could plow up. Every year you could plow up something, you know, different, and was a relic
I
of
went
that.
down to, in 1966, the young people, it was the Methodist church up here, were kind of going around these historical places, you know, like that. It goes kind of, I believe they went to Sacred Heart. And Mr. Elling, Brother Elling was a preacher of them there from Henderson. And we went down there,
Yeah.
the old one where the old woman's room. And they were just a barricade about 125 yards, I'd say, getting west of the west fence where you crawl under that part of that ditch.
The west fence to our place.
Well, it was just a bare spot there, and all you could see was pieces of glass about that square, you know,
Yeah.
whiskey bottles or jugs or something.
Yeah.
I don't know what they were.
People, you know, going down to visit the place, anything they could find, they carried off as souvenirs, you know, if it was jug handles or top of jugs or...
Do you remember Miss Walker? Now, did the corner saloon, didn't it face the west? Or do you remember?
Oh, I believe it did, yes.
Oh, it's on it did.
Yes, it faced the west.
They said when Hooky Miller shot that fella Hendricks down there and killed him, that the shooting first started in the saloon. Now that's what we heard, that's 1905, that's what we'd heard, you know. And this fellow backed out of that door there, front door, and got in the porch of the tree out there. Well, Hooky, when he went out the side door, and he went out with his body close to the ground. The fellow shot over him.
Mm-hmm.
But when Hooky didn't miss him, though,
Yeah.
Ed Hendricks.
What type of stores did you have downtown back in the early 1900s? Did you have a blacksmith shop or anything like that?
Well, yes, there used to be a blacksmith shop right here across the street and up near this ravine there. And let me see, there were several blacksmith shops here.
And we had a livery stable
Yeah, they had
that you could
several
hire
livery
a
stables.
horse and buggy, you know. If people came in on the train and needed transportation out someplace, why there was a livery stable that you could hire a horse and buggy to drive out in the country.
Yes, sir, you might hire them for all day, but let me tell you, when Easter time comes, they'd all be rented out to go to Sacred Heart.
Yeah. Everybody went out there to the...
And have their services in the morning, the Catholic people would, and then a big baseball game there afternoon.
I remember going there when I was 3 years old. My sister took me to the Catholic mission when I was 3. They, of course, they had an unusual service on Easter morning or Easter Sunday, and everybody went to see it. Non-Catholics and Protestants and everybody went to see this program. And my sister and a friend of hers took me and my niece, who was the same age. We were 3 years old, and I remember I was frightened to death. You know, I had never been in a church like that where they had big black curtains and the priest had a long black robe, and he came out and and carrying on the program, he came out, and all the language he used was Latin, you know, and I didn't understand a word he said, and I was frightened to death. I didn't know why he was going to come out and drag us behind the curtain. So it wasn't a very delightful thing for me, but of course my sister enjoyed it. She was...
There's an article run now in the Cornwall Leader from the Chronicles of Oklahoma. It tells about that place out there.
Yeah.
I think it was established in the 1870s.
Yeah, it's been there over 100 years, George. It was built back over 100 years ago.
Yeah.
And there's, let's see, there's 1, 2, 3 cemeteries that I know of. And 2 of them is back about half a mile west of the church. And then, of course, there's one there on the church ground. And the ones that are built way back there, they have people buried way back in the 1800s. And they were, you know, priests that had died there. And then they had another one with a great big crucifix of Christ on a cross. I remember that very well. And the sisters, the nuns, were buried in that one. They didn't even bury their nuns and the priests in the same graveyard. They had different.
I was up there with Mrs. Ed Jones. We were making in the early 30s. We were making a kind of survey, you know, of the veterans' graves.
Mm-hmm.
And we was up there and went there where that, I guess you call it the monastery, where the benediction cemetery is.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And I think there was two there that we found.
And they tell me now that they're reconstructing the old bakery and some of the old buildings that they used, you know, when they first built the church there.
Yeah.
I haven't been back out there now for 2 or 3 years, but the last time I was there, we went through the building that was the old bakery, and they're building back the ovens, this is the story they told me, that they were going to build back the ovens.
I believe, Miss Walker, they had a sawmill up there too at one time, because I remember Uncle Blair telling about people would take their logs up there and have them sawed this way. They may have done that for this house that they built down this half mile west of it.
Could have
He
been.
said he was talking with one of the brothers there, and you see, they different kinds. The priests, they call them fathers.
Yeah.
As we understand it. And there's different kinds of brothers, lay brothers, they were.
Yeah.
He said he was talking with one of these men, and it seemed like he had been from the old world, France or someplace over there.
Mm-hmm.
And he told Uncle Link said that he had given his life to God.
Yes.
And I guess that those people are very devout.
Yes, I'm sure they are.
Work, yeah.
They had to be, to live under the circumstances they came here in the early day and had to live under. It wasn't an easy life, I'm sure.
No, it tells about it. It was just Father Robert, they tell that was the name of fellow, or priest, that had to come to New Orleans. And it seemed like that all of this in through here, way back yonder, it seemed like it used to be called Arkansas Territory.
Yeah.
We understand it. And he had to be out there, he was out there a certain time before he was appointed, I think, the high position that he held there.
Yeah.
But there's one thing about those people, they're very strict with their discipline.
Yeah, right.
There's no
No foolishness about it.
No foolishness, and
And they certainly were resourceful.
Mm-hmm.
They could just, I was at Capistrano and read the history of the early days there, and of course they were Catholics. And they came from the old country there, and they had to raise their own food and have their own, they would pack their meat and sawdust and stuff like this, and they had a place built with real thick walls that they claimed they kept their perishables in, that it was cooler even through the summertime than any of the other buildings. And they certainly were resourceful people.
At that spring, then there was a well down there in the kind of the bottom beyond the schoolhouse, on the bottom of that creek. And then where we lived down there in 1902, just a rocked up wall.
Yeah.
You
Right.
get water anywhere you dug the bottom end.
Well, you know, when we moved in the old log schoolhouse, George, right down under the hill in the creek that run through there was a dug well that was blocked up with rocks, you know, and that's where we got our water all the years we lived there. We carried it up the hill from that spring, we called it.
Well, Sherman Blair said that he used to rig up 5 barrels on his wagon and haul water from these springs down here southwest town.
Yeah.
Of course, it's about that time it was, I guess, about a mile and a half journey.
Yeah, I'm sure it was.
They covered it all with stuff like this cotton sack in the top of it.
Yeah, keep the things from getting in it. Oh yeah, that was. But you know, as I remember, it was wonderful water that we had. It was a live spring that just there was a creek ran off from it all the time, and it was bound to have been pretty good drinking water. But we carried ours. I remember as we kids on wash days we'd have to carry up the water the day before and put it in tubs and fill the wash kettle that we built fire under out in the yard and boiled our clothes outside. I carried many a gallon of water.
Yeah, people have it pretty easy now.
All you have to do is turn a tap.
I'll tell you, we can boast in our generation, there was no juvenile delinquency.
No, we didn't have time. Delinquent.
And their parents wouldn't allow it anyhow.
No, but George, we were too busy.
Well, that's right.
Of course, I guess we could have rebelled, but where we would go, I don't know.
Well, what we didn't benefited by.
No, we wouldn't have. Couldn't have done anything different. So.
Well, I don't know. It seemed to me like during the Depression that the government was putting out a lot of money for relief, But it looked to me like where the man had a little start. It'd been well to give him that money and say, now stay there, bud. You make your living there, and this relief won't be over. Instead of that, why they did the other way. That was out of politics,
Yeah, right.
You see, this man was taken off when that quit. Why he was led to go on the sack. He had to go to a place he couldn't. They wouldn't let him raise anything.
No.
I don't know. He just in a bad way.
Yeah, sure. That was a bad time.
Nobody is saying is as long as a man can raise a part of his living, he's not going to starve.
No, right.
Sure ain't.
I remember when we had just quit teaching school and moved down on the farm in the Depression years, and we hired a fellow to run a turning plow behind a team of mules all day long for 50 cents a day. And of course, we milked 11 cows to get the money out of the milk and cream to pay him to plow that for 50 cents a day. I don't remember now how much we got, but it wasn't very much. I think about 25 or 30 cents for a pound of butter back then. And you got it the hard way. You milked in the cold and then churned it and brought it to town and sold it, I sold them many a pound of butter for 25 cents a pound.
Yes, and you can sell butter up the churn for about 10 cents a gallon.
Yeah, right.
Now, and it's way over $1 if you buy this.
Yes.
Milk.
Processed milk.
I'll tell you what, another fellow myself done one time. Out here on the Terry Place, east of town, there, why, we'd walk out there, take our dinners, and walk out there, and take our tools, cutting tools, and cut, we cut 2 ricks of wood a day, 75 cents for it.
What's your dad pay for a rick of wood now, Michael? Do you know?
Quite a bit. You can get a lot, $35, $40 up there in the city.
Yeah, I'm sure.
Well,
But anybody cut a rick of wood for 75 cents a day, oh, that sounds like an awful lot of work for a little pay.
well, you see, we had to kind of split. I think the stove wood we was cutting.
Yeah.
Stove wood, you got to split it pretty fine. You know.
Yeah, that's right.
But there's nothing else here. I don't know. I used to go to the harvest field, wheat field,
Yeah.
a few times.
My husband and I did that one year. Even after 1920, we went to the harvest fields one year, and he and I both worked. I worked in the cook shack, and he worked in the fields, you know. But
I've worked up there. It's getting bundles in the shop, the shop to wheat down there. They
Yes.
bundled it and mindered it, and I worked with a thrash machine up there, where it's a great big thrash machine. It's run by a steam engine, and they had 6 of us pitchers. We had 2 wagons to keep going there all the time. One was unloading, but we'd be loading the other.
yeah.
The best harvest I ever made was up there in about Maxville, Kansas. That's in there west of Hutchinson.
Yeah.
They had the wheat there.
That's where we were, but that was before they began heading.
Yeah.
They were still binding it when we were there that year. I think that was 1921 that we were there that summer. And they were binding it then. We were around Arkansas City and that little town west of there. West of Arkansas City. I've forgotten the name of it now. But anyway, it is out around the town of Arkansas City. We stayed there all one summer and then came back and taught school.
Well, some
winter.
people go follow the harvest straight off to Canada,
Yeah. I had
I
some friends that did.
started to do that in 1916 after I worked 16 and a half days there. We got $3 a day then.
Mm-hmm.
Pretty easy. One man his head.
Kansas City, I've forgotten the name of it now. But anyway, it is out around the town of Arkansas City. We stayed there all one summer and then came back and taught school.
Well,
that
some
winter.
people go follow the harvest straight off to Canada,
Yeah. I had some friends that did.
I started to do that in 1916 after I worked 16 and a half days there. We got $3 a day then.
Mm-hmm.
Pretty easy. One man, this header, the wheat was just about that high and it'd get just about that much up,
Yeah.
and it was easy to move back in this barge. And drive right, team right along with the header. And I went up into South Dakota, but I didn't go to the wheat fields there. It wasn't that far up. I don't know, I worked there in a town that was called Lenox for several months. Them people up there never had the work of their crops like we do down here in the cotton.
I remember when we first began farming in the Canadian River bottom, we planted mostly cotton and corn, just enough corn to feed our hogs and our stock through the winter. It's mostly cotton that we raised for a money crop. And down there in that bottom, when we first began farming there, George, the cotton would grow 7 and 8 and 10 foot tall. I was just a child and I could get lost in there, and I just, you know, I think I would never get out. It'd be a big field and such tall cotton, and boy, it raised a lot of cotton too.
Well,
Sometimes
that's what we found out. Now, that's why the upland, these, you know, it never grow over that high, about 2 feet, and the sun could get in there and open those bowls.
Yeah. Yes, it took until after a frost, you know, for that down there, it was so heavy and so much foliage and so tall that it took a frost to get rid of the foliage so that the cotton could open.
You sure couldn't miss a corn crop, no, down there.
Yeah.
It's up irrigated.
Yeah.
In 1952, the city, somewhere or another, these wells down here on the river, they never had to keep a plot or a diagram of their valve there. And between those 2 wells, they had a bunch of us digging, and we dug, I guess, maybe 300 feet, and they finally found it. Finally found it going out north, the first well there, the number 1 well later on. But they had then something like 3 and 4 foot of sand washed in on top of that, but you see that black dirt, you know, down there where we have to dig it down that far. Well, that black dirt, that used to be real dirt.
Yeah, it certainly raised good corn and cotton.
Yes. That old river, I'll tell you, it's got more tricks than any magician ever lived.
It sure did.
It done its worst, damage, I'd say, when it's bank full and gets the whirling in that bank.
Yeah.
And just as sure as it did, you'd see a crack back 3 to 10 feet. You want to get back, now that took in many, destroyed many a good
farm
piece of land there in just maybe a day or so.
Right.
Oh, right.
Oh, in 24 hours, a whole farm could be washed away.
Yeah.
Just go off down the river.
Well, I heard one of the old timers say he knowed of 40 acres up here in the river bottom. Had a lot of pecan trees on them. And got up that washing and said the washing just destroyed those. Just washed them in the river and covered them up here. Just destroyed.
Well, you know, Art Stevens used to have a farm up there in the old Cox school district.
Yeah.
And they said that it just washed his whole farm away one year.
Well, it's the most destructive element there ever was in this of nature.
It could just take wonderful farms away in a day and a night, just wash it completely away. You'd have maybe 500 or 600 acres one day, and the next day you wouldn't have any. It'd just be all gone.
Well, it's a good thing they dehorned it, taking the water out of it.
Right. Yes, this flood control has certainly helped a great deal in a lot of places.
Well, they've taken the water out of it, I guess, in some places, to irrigate. Well, say, what I think I'll tell you, Joe Allen's half-brother, Gus Brunson, died up here, I think in the late 50s, at Mountain Home, Arkansas. They lived out there on the farm there in a tree. And his wife, Grace. Do you remember those faucets used to live down there?
Yeah, I remember my people telling about the faucets.
Well, there was Grace and May and Fred, but Grace was Gus Brunson's wife.
Yeah.
And I don't know, they have several children. I don't know whether I used to get Christmas cards from her, but this last year, I don't know, maybe she had passed away. But anyway, she told me that sometime in the past 10 or 12 years before Gus passed away, that he went out to Canadian, Texas, and said all of Joel's children, 7 children, still living at that time.
Well, I'll say.
I remember the 2 girls used to go to school, and Charlie, he went to school when I did down there, Charlie Allen.
Oh, now,
it was all this.
Gus Bronson.
He's crippled.
Yeah, and didn't he live down there or have something to do with the stores or the corner saloon or something, the Bronsons?
Well, I don't know, Miss Walker, whether he did or not. But,
I remember the Fawcett's. I think they lived at one time for a while just across the field from us down there in that community.
well, right north of where we lived, and under the log, or under that hill above, they lived in a log house north of us, just on the west side of the road, and it had a gallery in between it. That's where they lived.
Oh, yeah, I remember that house. Yes, I remember that house.
Well, it's too bad the way that Jess and Joe wound up. But,
Yes, it was.
Mom said that one time down there, they were sitting outside on some lumber there on the west side of the store there, outside, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And he said Joe Allen and Jess West was there, and also this man that Gus Bobbitt,
Mm-hmm.
man that was bushwhacked, you know, or
Yeah.
ambushed. So they were sitting there talking, and I don't know what the talk was all about, he didn't say, but he said directly, Miss Bobbitt pulled his gun belt around, you know, and kind of got worked back, and asked one of them, he said, did you folks see anything of that bald-faced steer of mine when you shipped out your cattle? He said, no, we never saw anything of him. He said, well, it's doggone funny. He said, every time you folks ship out cattle, it seems like I lose.
Yeah.
Uncle said he thought the little battle like a long come on fence, but someone else didn't.
Yeah. Well, I guess from all accounts, they must have been kind of swiping people's cattle, and when they maybe they just rounded it up with theirs. I guess we had free range, and they just rounded it up with their own and sold everything they rounded up. And I guess part of it might have belonged to somebody else.
Well, it might
But I
have
think
been.
that was probably what the deal was all
My
about.
uncle used to have a brand, the Blair Brothers BB.
Yeah,
And it seemed like there was a Negro here in this country that had the same brand.
yeah,
So they just changed there to a 7H. 7, you know what?
Yeah.
7 and H.
H.
7H brand.
yeah.
Well, that was,
Everybody had to keep their cattle branded because they did get mixed up with other
that's right
people.
too, especially with open range.
Yeah, right.
Old man Lige Sanders, I guess, of course he was talked quite a bit, but I guess he knew pretty well what was going on all over the country all the time. Anyway.
Yeah, well, he lived here through some pretty rough times,
Yeah,
George.
that's right.
And my brother-in-law used to be a deputy under him. And they went through some pretty rough times, old Lige did. And he was a U.S. Marshal for
Yes, he was deputy U.S. Marshal.
Yeah.
And what drove the fear into the people who was about halfway criminal was that he was always on the go. They never did know.
They didn't know when he was going to turn up.
Yeah, that's right there.
He was always
bootlegging and stealing cattle and horses was kind of the main crimes them days.
And he kept up with things pretty close.
Yes, that's right. He
To
did.
try to keep things like that down. He did a lot of good, Lige did.
And I don't think Lige, I saw one little incident, I don't think Lige wanted to demean and amuse demean anybody. One time they had a 3-day picnic here, out here on the Watts Station is, out at the edge of town there.
Yeah, I remember that.
And somewhere or another, I don't know how the rumor got in here that the Little River neighbors were going to break it up. They was pretty bad men themselves over there.
Yeah.
Like they couldn't shoot a white man without hitting him. Well, anyway, they deputized, I don't know, several for it. And during one of these days, there was a big Negro named John T. Berry that raised a fuss at some stands, on the stands there. Well, he got on his horse and rode off. And somehow the word got to Lige Sanders about it, and so Lige, I think, was riding a mule and took after him and caught him up there about just north of where the old Methodist church was. You know where that was?
Yeah, I know where that was.
And he had to get down, and the big folks began to gather around, and the nigger got scared. He said, "White folks," said, "don't gather around me." He said, "I ain't no outlaw." Old man lied, he laughed, said, "No, boy," said, "I know John, he's all right." I guess he searched him and brought him on down here.
Did you ever witness any hangings or anything like that?
No, I never did witness anything like that. They didn't generally hang people. Here they shoot them, or something like that, but as far as the hanging, so I don't.
No,
Were they ever hanging?
I don't think, I never did hear of a hanging, except, that, with Jesse West and, Joe Allen, they hung them over at Ada and the North.
Two others with them, too.
Yeah, but, that was just, vigilante, bunch that rounded them up and called.
It was the Masons.
Yeah, I don't know, there was nobody ever acknowledged to having had anything to do with it, but the men of the town.
They just,
But that's the only hanging that I ever remember of hearing in my lifetime in Oklahoma.
well, that's me. Now, I heard a man say that used to live there across the street from me. He lived over in Francis during that time. I think he went up there. He said one of them was put there beat to death. I guess that was Jesse West before he hung. Right? He said to told him, he said that my shooting arms in Texas said here would be a different story, and I guess it would too.
Yeah.
I always thought he had more nerve than the other man.
Yeah, he probably did have.
Yeah.
He was pretty, wasn't he part Indian? Was Jesse?
Well, I never did know.
I believe he was just part Indian. But,
Do you remember that he had a boy named Mark? And somewhere or another there was a Negro that would come along this territorial line, and he got somewhere or another got scared his horse, the firecracker. But anyway, this Negro shot him. I don't know how many times he done that. Anyway, he shot him and he died, and they sure scarred the country for that fellow. And I guess maybe they might have hung made away with some innocent Negroes from what I can hear back during that time.
yeah.
But later on, I think they caught him, and I understood he was sent to the penitentiary and died there. I don't know.
Yeah, I think they tried to go through a process of law for most things.
Yeah.
They didn't just take people out and hang them like they did in some areas in the early days.
No, the thing of it was, too, the officers on this side of the line for statehood didn't have any authority over on the other
Over
side.
on the other side, they couldn't do anything about it. Right.
I remember what my uncle said, when my uncle sold his place to Wait, I believe it was down in 1910, he didn't reserve anything, so.
No.
And, I don't, must have been in the, when was it, they got pretty good dwell on it.
Oh, it was, back in the
40s?
40s, the 39 or 40s.
Or somebody you talked about, he said, I don't regret my sales, I hope he gets another well.
Yeah, he got some, one especially, a real good well there. It was just, a gusher.
Yeah.
But I don't know whether, I don't know how much money he ever got out of it, George. He didn't, you know, he was such a quiet, funny, turn man that you didn't know anything about what he, and didn't have any, high ambitions or anything like. He just wanted to live a quiet.
He did build him a new home there, didn't he?
Yes, they built a new house there. And then eventually, of course, he sold out there and moved to town after he become too old to work.
Do you remember any bad storms or tornadoes?
Well, one of the things I remember is this last one we had here in 61.
I think that's, of course, we had some that didn't reach this town out in the country, but that's about the only one that I remember after I got old enough to, you know, be involved. But a colored lady that used to work for me said that years ago, she was quite old when she was working for me. And, you know, where we lived, where we built our home after Ray and I built up on the hill there, down beneath the hill in the little draw that went through there, she said there was a tornado came through there years and years and years ago. And nearly all of those trees were just topped, you know, the tops were just broke out of them. And she said that was from this tornado years ago that came through there.
Well, down here, this side of East Fairview, in there about, I guess 3/4 of a mile, there was a place in there they used to call Cyclone Prairie.
Yeah.
You remember hearing about that? I don't know whether it is a tornado or something that went through there or not, but it was on that half section that East Fairview School House.
Yes. Evidently, they did have a tornado or two that went through there, and it seemed like they just maybe you'll have two in a spot, and it kind of follows the same path. I know we had, you know, out here in the country two that it didn't do a lot of damage. It just touched down a few places, but it followed the same path that killed.
Here northwest.
Yeah, they killed the camels, you know.
Yeah, it seemed like that they was one out there that first hit about a mile west of there. And then the next one just come, they all come in the southwest.
Yeah, right, And they just, those two followed just along about the same path.
Yeah. They do some funny, freakish things too. Now, they just go in a whirl and ain't nothing standing there path, I don't think.
George, you all were not living down there in the bottom when they had that spinal meningitis
No,
epidemic.
we was living up here. That is down in the bend.
Yeah.
No.
Harry Reeser was living in the old Waite, you know, and that house across the road from us. This is your uncle's place, I guess, still then. He and his wife, let's see, was she a Birch?
Yeah, she was Jessie Birch.
Yeah. They were living there the first year they was married, and they, people just died, and they didn't have anybody to help bury them or anything. They took them out and buried them at night down in the bend down there. And I remember my mother, she was a kind of an old-fashioned doctor, and she started, as soon as she heard about it, she started in giving us sulfur and molasses and cream of tartar. We had to line up every morning and take our dose of sulfur and molasses, and she gave it, they had also had smallpox epidemic there, and my oldest brother caught it and come home, and of course this.
Well, what was your oldest brother's name?
Walter.
I was thinking that.
Yeah, Walter. So then, of course, all of us had to have it, but she had been giving us this old home remedy so long that I hardly knew I had it. You know, I just broke out a spot or two.
Yeah.
And the same way with the measles. I was always lucky. I guess nothing ever hurt me very bad. But I know that the tales they told about the meningitis epidemic as a child, it just seemed terrible to me. And you remember old, let's see, there was an old fellow here. What was his name? Leach?
Tommy Leach. Yeah, Tommy Leach. Yeah.
Tommy Leach. He braved the epidemic and went down and helped people out down there. And I remember one family, and someone told me this now, he used to come see us after my father died to find out if we needed anything. You know, he must have been a wonderful old fellow. I don't know, but anyway, he would come out to see if we needed anything. And I remember one year he brought a whole bunch of clothes, and I remember him. I think I was about 6, and he took me on his lap, and I was barefooted, and he wanted to know what size shoes I wore, and I told him I didn't know, and so he said, well, he measured my foot, and he said, we've got to get you some shoes. So the next time he came, he brought shoes, and I remember how I hated it so bad because I love to go barefooted. I had to wear those shoes after he brought me shoes. But anyway, I go back to the story of his visiting people down there. There was a family that their little girl took spinal meningitis, and of course everybody that took it nearly died. Yeah. And so he went to visit this family, and one day he went down, and this little girl had took it, and she was real bad, and they just got up and moved off and left her. So he took her and nursed her, and she got well. And he, I don't know whether he tried to adopt her or maybe did. But in later years, these people came back and took her away from him. Do you remember that?
Well, I remember hearing somebody say something other about that, but I didn't.
They said that he took care of her, and I think they even went to California. Anyway, they left out and just went clear away and left that little girl.
He was kind of a little bench-legged man, that Mr. Leach was, and he smoked a corncob pipe.
Yeah, yes, I do.
I never did know what he done here in town.
I don't know either. But I do remember he visited us several times, and during the time we had, my brothers, the same winter they had measles, they had pneumonia. And he came and brought groceries, and he came and brought clothes, and just came, to see if we needed anything. He was very...
Dr. Huddleston wasn't here at that time, but I heard him talking one day about that epidemic. He said he thought that what they had told him, it was what they called back in Arkansas the swamp fever.
Yeah, because it was right after that big flood, and they said so much there'd be debris, and water had stood, and I don't know whether that was what caused it or not, but they thought maybe it might have had something to do with the epidemic.
Well, they didn't know when they took it, they didn't last very long.
No, they didn't, and they didn't know a thing in the world to do for it, what anything.
They didn't.
They just died whole families.
No, sure didn't. Well, I don't know, just so many things like that happened that...
Oh, George, do you know anything about Harry Reeser, where he is now?
Yes, Harry died in 1971.
Oh, did he?
Yeah.
Well,
See, he married again, and had several children. He was here in 58, 1958. We went down in the old neighborhood.
Oh, I'd like to
around
see him.
and come back. He said, well, I'm lost. So there ain't nothing like remember that.
No.
But anyway, his boy, he had one boy. I think he lived out there with one of his boys named Charles, out in Hastings, Michigan, out on Route 4. I don't know. I never was there, but Anyway, he told me that he was working out in a flower bed. I believe it was in May 1971, and just keeled over today.
He just died suddenly.
He was about 89 years old.
I felt so sorry for him when he and his wife had just been married a short time when she died.
Yeah.
And he was so lost after she passed away. He lived just across the road from us, and of course I was just
There was, he had a brother named Dan, and then he had a sister named Lily and Oni. Her name was, I think, was Leon. They called her Oni. And she died several years back too, so there's none of that member of the Reacher family live now except his boys.
His children.
I don't know whether Dan, his brother, was ever married or not. I don't know. But anyway, the Uncle Sherman pretty raised Harry.
Yes, I knew that he lived with your uncle a long time.
Harry Reacher.
He seemed like a real fine fellow.
Harry's all right.
I know he talked with a kind of a brogue or something. I couldn't understand him too well when I was just 6 years old, and he would be kidding his wife, and ask me if that's what I thought about it, and of course I'd always say yes because he asked me, and half the time I didn't know what he was asking. He was just teasing his wife because she was sick a lot and couldn't.
I think she was about the prettiest one of those girls.
Oh, she was a lovely person. She was a beautiful girl. She sure was.
I don't know whether Bud's sister Carrie, she married a fellow named, what was his name? Some kind of, I can't remember now. Just what it was. They lived with Earlborough. I think he died. I don't know whether she's still living or not.
I don't know either.
I don't think that his oldest sister, she was named Bertie. I don't think she's living.
Yeah. Well, I knew Bud and Mrs. Birch, but I didn't know any of the rest of that family, and I just knew them, through Harry and
It seemed to me like that they lived before they moved to town out here. Well, it was on what was on the old Robin place, a mile west, a mile south, on the hot side. I believe that they lived out there.
Yes, they did.
That's what it is.
Well, Michael, you about got everything you want?
I think so.
I don't know whether we told you anything that'll help your story or not. Hope it has.
Well, we just live with our old memories.
Yeah.
We ain't got like one baseball clown in up there in Washington said one time he was going down the street and some fortune teller said, "Come in here," and said, "Let me tell your future." He said, "No, lady, my future's behind me." That's the way it is.
Now, future's behind us.
Yeah, our future's behind us. We don't know this far, I don't know.
Not much left for us now.
No. We lived to see when this raw territory was just in the raw, up to the Commonwealth it is now.
Right.
It's all in pasture now. There's no farming anymore.
No. And back then it was all farming areas.
Right, yes.
Cotton fields and corn and
even though the old man used to live down here about a half mile south of town on the west side of the road, a little old log cabin. I don't remember what his name was. He seemed like his Pouch or something. And he had about a quarter of an acre of tobacco. Planted there, raised it, dried it, and sold it, I guess.
well, Wallace Cargill lived off down close to Sasakwa, but for years and years he raised all the tobacco they used, and there was a pretty good sized family of them.
Yeah.
And he had his tobacco patch. He had lived in Georgia, and he knew just exactly the thing to do to raise tobacco. And they raised this tobacco, and he'd pick it and hang it up in the shed, and they all used it. If they smoked, while they smoked it, they just grind it up in their hands and put it in a you know, and a cigarette. But
Well,
they chewed it a lot of the time.
This country used to raise a little bit of that in anything.
Yeah.
It never was a big, small grain country. It raised oats and stuff.
They chewed it a lot of the time.
This country used to raise a little bit of that in anything.
Yeah.
It never was a big, small grain country. It raised oats and stuff that way.
Yeah.
I guess wheat is even. I know it raised rye, because I raised it in my garden.
Yeah.
Well, just for curiosity, you know.
Yeah.
But it sure makes a sod, or it didn't have.
Yeah, it does. It's good for the soil, I guess.
Well, I guess that's what was the trouble. You see this soil, and they just took all from it and
Worked it to death.
yeah, worked to death, never put nothing back. So Robin just paid out, I guess.
Yeah, that's right.
Then there was
Now they've got to build it back in pasture to get it back where it'll even graze cattle.
I'd like to thank Mrs. Raymond Berry for helping me question George Blair. George was born in Ohio in 1893, which makes him 79 years old.